This is Jenny DeHuff, editor of Philadelphia Weekly, and I'm about to interview City Controller Rebecca Rhynhart about how her first term in office has been. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for being here. You pulled off an incredible political upset when you defeated three-term incumbent City Controller Alan Butkovitz in 2017. Mm-hmm. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So we'll just jump right into it. Starting with a two-part question. You spent 9 years in the Nutter and Kenney administrations, respectively. What do you feel you got out of your time with each mayor, and how did their leadership styles differ?
So I did really enjoy both and found it rewarding to work in both administrations. I learned a lot about city government. I feel that I made a positive impact. But at the same time, I think after those 9 years, I really wanted to disrupt things more than I could disrupt them from an appointed position. So that's why I wanted to run for office. I think every mayor has their own style of management, of leadership, but from my position, I was the city treasurer and the budget director under Nutter, and then the chief administrative officer, which is overseeing the back office function under Mayor Kenney, leading up to 2016 when I made the decision to run for office. I really learned a lot about the city and how the city works and also how it doesn't work in that time.
So I know you've done some modernization when you took over the controller's office. But what were the biggest areas of waste you identified when you got in here? What really outraged you where you saw the obvious cost savings right away?
So it's interesting because what really led me to run for office was all of the things I saw working in the city government that needed to change. And a lot of the entrenchment and connections that led to taxpayer dollars not being spent in the best way possible. So I knew coming into it when I won the controller's race that there was going to be wasteful spending that I would find as the controller. Absolutely. I think what surprised me coming into the controller's office was one, actually, the controller's office itself. They're very hardworking, great auditors and the audit staff, but at the same time, there were other positions and areas in which I definitely made some significant changes with staffing. So I think that that was an initial challenge, and we quickly revamped certain areas of the office, like the fraud investigations area, really professionalized that from before my tenure. I think, though, one of the biggest surprises to me coming in was an audit that my office did right in that first year in 2018. And it was the audit of internal controls. And I know that sounds so dry and boring, but it's really not, because it's the audit of controls over how the city prevents fraud, right? How the city manages taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. And this is all about how do we manage people's money, right? Taxpayer dollars is people's dollars, and we need to do a better job. And what this audit found that my office did in June 2018 was that the city hadn't reconciled its largest cash account in 3 years. I mean, and that's, I feel like we need to pause there for a second just to say the city had not reconciled its largest cash account. And the city is supposed to reconcile it daily. And there was $33 million unaccounted for. And this was a big deal. And I really took a stance and said, we need to do better than this. My office went back in and did the same audit in 2020 and found that there's some improvement. The city found the majority of that $33 million, but it's not good enough. The city still has the weakest internal controls. which indicates a higher likelihood of fraud being able to occur, and that should not be the case.
Quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
Slide over this way, just a little bit closer to this.
Yeah.
As close as you can get. Just have our eye lines more this way. Sorry.
Okay.
Quick follow-up on that, and it sounds like there's so much work to do. And maybe this question is premature, but what's left to clean up? Is there more along this area? But is there more work to do in this area, or is there like what's left?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of work to be done, and I continue to push for change in how our government operates, and that it is from everything, from things like internal controls, how the city actually safeguards dollars. We still have the worst internal controls of the top 10 largest cities. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. And we need to improve. And the improvement that occurs on an annual basis from the mayor's finance director and financial unit is small compared to the problem. So that's an area of concern, and that needs improvement. And then we, as a government, need to run the city better. And so that's something that I constantly lean into with special audits and performance audits to say, what are we doing right now as the city? And how do we do that better? And there's so many things, Jenny. I mean, so many things that need to be improved upon. And I really want to be that voice of calling things out, taking tough stances, and saying, we need better. The people of our city deserve better. And here is a roadmap to get there.
Excellent. Excellent. I believe it. When you first took office, you said you wanted to fix problems with the Philadelphia Parking Authority. You told Philly Mag in 2017 that the parking authority was, quote, Republican controlled, unquote, and had a culture of mismanagement. Do you feel you have done anything about fixing any of those problems?
Yes, and but also they're difficult problems. Mm-hmm. So, and what I had said to Philly Mag, or had said a lot, is that it is Republican controlled, but the patronage jobs are both Democrat and Republican. So this isn't, to me, the parking authority's issues is not about party politics as much as about government not truly working for people. And what I saw coming in to being the controller while I was running for office, that there was this hesitancy of many electeds from standing up to the parking authority. A few did, but many would not, because the parking authority has had a history of giving out jobs to those that are connected. So if you're connected and you need to find a job for a family member, well, the parking authority is often the place to do that and go to, which is completely not right, because those are people's tickets. All the tickets that people pay go to the parking authority. The meter revenue goes to the parking authority. And then the parking authority spends what they spend. And then the rest of the money goes to the city. And then finally, the remainder goes to the school district. So every dollar that the parking authority can save is a dollar that goes to the schools, which is so, so important. So my office did the audit of the parking authority spending and released it a few months ago. And it really found that the staffing levels at the parking authority are much higher and inflated compared to parking entities across the country. That there is a high percentage of employees that are connected to the political system. Either they are ward leaders, committee people, or live with a ward leader or committee person. And we found about a little over 20 to 24% of the sample that we took, actually they were elected officials in the party system, or were living with them.
Wow.
So this doesn't even count for those that just know someone or in-laws or friends. And that's just not an efficient, effective way to run government. The problem with the parking authority, though, is that the board is set up in a way that they have these 10-year terms, and it's difficult to make the change happen.
Sure, I understand.
So when you first asked the question, you said, have you led to change occurring? I have pushed for that change. I have shined a light on the problem and said it needs to change, but it's difficult to make that change when the board has 10-year terms appointed by the state. So
Okay.
that's the difficulty there.
I understand.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, speaking of patronage and party politics, you said you're a firm believer in the Democratic Party. Despite its flaws in history of corruption in Philadelphia, and that you've also said the party can change, but this city has Democrats in charge for almost 50 years. And we have a long list of elected officials, as you know, accused and convicted of all sorts of sleazy crimes. So, looking back from when you first took office, what's changed? And even before that?
Mm-hmm. So I do believe in the Democratic Party. I am a Democrat. I think we need good Democrats, and it's a fight that I have on a regular basis with the Democratic Party. So I stand up to the Democrats all the time here in the city. That, to me, it's about, yes, I'm a Democrat, but I can also say this Democratic Party needs some significant change here in the city. And we need to actually be for people in terms of how we're operating. We need to be more efficient, more effective, so that each taxpayer dollar goes farther, right? That's what government should be doing. But I think that there can be good Democrats, and I'm one of them, and that it's not about that we need a change in party. To me, I don't feel that as much as we need good people to stand up to the status quo.
Absolutely. Let's talk briefly about the report you issued following the chaos last summer. You called what happened a, quote, lack of planning, end quote, and a, quote, failure of leadership, end quote, all the way up to and including the mayor. I believe you told Inside Story that there was a blueprint that could have been used to prepare for those days of mass protests. Do you believe that Brian Abernathy, Daniel Outlaw, Jim Kenney, and others willfully ignored any such blueprint that was available for this type of mass demonstration, which led to riots and looting and tear gas and rubber bullets?
I think that what we found was that there wasn't planning. So it just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. What we found was that despite a blueprint being there to plan, that George Floyd was murdered on a Monday. Protests, this was in May of 2020. So protests started in other cities and turned violent starting that next day on a Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, protests, looting, violence were occurring across the country. It wasn't until Friday that the city of Philadelphia had its first planning meeting. And the protest was scheduled for Saturday in Philly. And the initial planning for deployment had significantly fewer police officers than were put on duty for the Super Bowl parade. So the investigation found that that was a failure. That was a failure of leadership. Now you can ask, who, right? Who in leadership? How did this happen? And what the investigation showed was that there were a few things. There was the position of Inspector of Homeland Security That's a position in the police department that has been instrumental in planning for protest and civil unrest. That position at the time was vacant. Mm-hmm. Then there was no independent head of emergency management. That traditionally has had a strong independent head. Right now it's being filled by the fire commissioner, who, according to the investigation, viewed his role differently than past independent directors. He viewed it as, well, this is more of a police thing. And he had left town for that weekend. And then you have the mayor who was at the helm, and so therefore is responsible. So it was a failure up to the top, and it just can never happen again. Can never happen again.
This next question came from one of our readers after soliciting a few of them.
Okay.
After the comment the mayor made about Monday morning quarterbacking and you being more concerned about your own resume, is it safe to say that despite your years having worked for him, any perceived lingering allegiance is pretty much gone by now?
Yeah. As soon as I resigned to run for office, there was no more allegiance there. And I think that was an interesting comment that he made, because when something as big as what happened in Philadelphia at the end of May and early June, when you had looting and a lack of the police being able to respond to that looting, business owners feeling completely unprotected, you had people, many innocent people on 52nd Street tear gassed. You have all those events. I don't think that's Monday morning quarterbacking. I think that needs a thorough look to say, what in the world happened? We haven't used tear gas since 1985. What happened here, and how do we do this better? I was elected to do a job, and I felt that from day one. I work for the people. I was elected by the people, and I don't view things the way that many politicos view things, where there should be some sort of allegiance to each other. I view it as my allegiance is to the people.
Awesome. All right, switching topics, another question from a reader that
Sure.
I wrote in. With warmer weather soon upon us, it's only a matter of time before ATVs and dirt bikes will be owning city streets. Do you have any thoughts on this practice, and do you believe there should be any mitigation efforts?
I think that there are quality of life issues and issues that if people feel bothered by either noise or other issues regarding any activity, then it needs to be thought through, and it needs a thought out response. And that's what I think, that this can come up in so many different things, where some people in our city say, we want to do this and this is our right. And then other people say, well, that bothers me. Right? And I think what we need to do is say, okay, let's think about this. How do we develop some structure? How do we make our city one where we can respect each other and figure out solutions, common sense solutions that often are not made? So I think the issues like this come up a lot, which is, how do we all live together, and do we have good leadership at the top to navigate that? And that's what we need.
So would you be for an ATV park down anywhere?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, do people want an ATV park?
Councilman Alan Don proposed it.
Okay.
Like
so similar to like skate park.
Yeah, but, and I don't want to go down this road too
Sure,
far,
sure.
but how would people get their ATVs there? Would they drive them there? Would they put them on a flatbed truck? Not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know my full thoughts on the issue. To be continued. I'm open to...
Your problem.
Yeah, no, but look, I'm open to pros and cons if your readers and listeners want to share them with me.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to the city budget.
Sure.
We're facing a deficit of $450 million thus far. Do you have any ideas for best reconciling that, even though this is not necessarily necessarily your, but anyway, that's fair.
So last year, when COVID first hit with the shutdown, last March and April, the mayor proposed a revised budget in May. And it had some tax increases in it and some pretty severe cuts to the arts and a few other areas. And I thought at the time there's got to be a better way to balance that budget, especially because under Kenny, the budget has gone up by $1 billion pre-COVID. And just for a sense of scale, the budget it was about $5 billion at that time. So it had gone up by $1 billion. That is a lot. Yeah. And at the same time, resident satisfaction by the mayor's administration own resident survey had not gone up. So here you are spending $1 billion, having people not more satisfied. So therefore, we should be able to balance it. And this was my thinking last year. We should be able to find areas and ways to balance the budget without impacting people, without raising taxes, without these severe cuts. And my office did release the alternative way to balance the budget, which found the savings. And we went through the budget page by page and said, there are savings. We can get overtime down across the city back to where it was several years ago, adjusted for inflation. Right now, the city's spending about $8,000 per employee on overtime. Several years ago, it was $6,000. This is all adjusted for inflation per employee. And I don't need to get bogged down in the numbers, but that equates to about $40 million a year in savings. And we came up with a whole list of things that said, we can just manage the city better, Mayor. And, so here is the alternative proposal. Going into this year, what I had expressed should happen is that really every different avenue of the city's operation should have been reviewed to say, how do we do this in the best way possible? And then compare that to the status quo, right? That didn't happen. So now here we are a year later facing this $450 million budget shortfall. I think that we'll see how much is in the federal stimulus package, which I think might be voted on today, but we'll see how much is coming to cities and counties, and specifically to Philadelphia County. But even if that's in the hundreds of millions, there's still going to be an amount that we'll have to solve for. And my office will be leaning in over the next month and putting something out around our ideas on how to solve. I think that the last thing we need to be doing during a pandemic and coming out of a pandemic is raising taxes. I also think we shouldn't be making severe cuts to areas that make us the world-class city, such as the arts. So we need to figure this out in a smart way.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what you offer up. And finally, COVID, of course. What did Philadelphia do wrong? Your office is, of course, charged with investigating this stuff. Mm-hmm. Bobby Heenan's family got the vaccine first, thanks to Philly fighting COVID. I don't want to presuppose anything, but can you give us any insight as to what you've uncovered thus far, assuming you've investigated this, about what happened with Philly fighting COVID?
The whole issue with Philly fighting COVID is so unbelievable. And as a resident and taxpayer of the city, when I was reading the paper, which was the first time I heard of it, I thought, what in the world? This is so unbelievable. This group of kids, no healthcare experience, 22 years old, landing the job to vaccinate our people? This is insane. So investigations do take some months to do. I always want the answer the next day, but my staff always says it takes a few months. So we are investigating Philly fighting COVID, how they were selected, why there supposedly is no contract, how this whole thing happened, so that it doesn't happen again. And that's really what I want, is that we need to figure out the truth. And I always think this, we need the truth in order to understand what we need to do differently in the future.
Absolutely. Well, this is my last question for
Sure.
you. Mayor Kenney's term is up in 2 years. Who do you think will be the Democratic nominee, and will it be you?
Oh. Look, Jenny, I love this city, and I think that this city deserves a leader that is visionary, that is strong, that loves this city, really loves the city. At the same time, I'm up for re-election in May, which I know no one's thinking about the city controller re-election, but there is a race in May. And just doing my job at this point, doing my job, trying to be the best controller I can possibly be, calling out wrongdoing, saying here are areas that we can save money, how do we operate in the best way possible, and how do we change things, because we need government to change here. And a lot of people are concerned right now, concerned about how the city is going to recover, concerned about the homicide rate, concerned about crime. What direction is our city going in? And that concern is understandable. And we need strong leadership. But at the same time, I'm focused on my role here as the controller at this point.
All right. Well, that is the sum of my questions. Is there anything you think I didn't ask you or that you want to talk about?
No, I think you covered most things. I think, look, there's a lot of challenges, and we just need to approach them in